Hello, I'm Reggie Turner, and I'm here with Andy Overton, Terrence Moore, and Matt Breeding. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. News about a vaccine in regards to the COVID virus is fast and furious these days. And the article that we're going to start with today from the Maryland Reporter is, could you lose your job refusing the COVID-19 vaccine? Terrence.
Could you lose your job? Most likely not. Should you lose your job? Absolutely not. I know that the vaccine is extremely important, and we definitely want to see everyone take it as much as possible so it can be effective, but not to the point where we're taking away human rights. All right, this is my body. I choose what to do with it. If we can't get people to wear masks at work, let alone how can we get them to inject something into their body? Though it may be beneficial to us as a whole, I can't see taking someone's livelihood for the vaccination.
Matt.
That's a double-edged sword. I can see it. We already mandate for public schools that kids must take a vaccination to attend public schools. I solidly see the necessary portion of public safety. Perhaps in the public sector world, police, firefighters that are paid by the taxpayers, I could see it being a condition of employment. In the private sector, not at all. I think that would be a huge invasion. So with that, I agree, my body, but I can see that again in the public sector where you are forced to deal with people that you don't have a choice that you can isolate from. I can see where that might be a condition of employment.
Andy, what do you say to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you, actually. I think that we have to really figure out what type of employment folks are. I think that's a big blanketed statement. Can you lose your job? If you're a nurse, you're probably going to have to be vaccinated. If you work at Fort Detrick inside of a lab, you're probably going to have to be vaccinated, just like you are in 1,000 different things. I'm not a medical scientist. I don't know all the vaccinations, but I know that some jobs you have to be protected, and then the public has to be protected against you. But I agree within the public sector, but here's kind of the double-edged sword. So you say no, right? I'm not going to take this vaccine, but you come in and then you get 5 people sick, and they know it's you because you're the only one that becomes sick. Then what? Then we have a corporation who's 10 or 15 people down. We have a possible spreader again. If we have more than one person not taking this vaccine, is what I'm saying. And then what happens, right? Can you be sued? Can the company be sued? What happens there?
And maybe we should look at the same thing we do with a lot of other vaccinations, a titer test, to determine, do you have the antibodies already? If you've got the antibodies, and many people that have already had the virus have it, why do they need to take a vaccination? Why do we need to consume those resources for someone else that might not have the antibodies?
But that's the issue right now. From what we hear, antibodies only stay in your body for up to 6 months. So there's a time frame on those antibodies in your body as well. And we still haven't determined why some people are carriers that are asymptomatic and why some people die from the disease.
That's right.
So I still think it's too much unknown to put that kind of enforcement on someone's employment.
I think it's interesting because this virus might be the most studied virus in the least amount of time of any virus. I think if they went around here and drew samples of our blood, and for me, like a person like myself, I've been in 27 countries. And you know, through the military, Lord knows what I've been exposed to and what antibodies my body's developed. I think it'd be interesting that how many, we all go around that you're saying, we think it lives 6 months, but it might live, and again, that's the purpose of a titer test, to determine your level of immunity at any given time. And if you've got a strong response, again, if we're only doing 20 million vaccines this month and 30 in January and 50 in February, why not save that vaccination for someone that really needs it?
But that's a really good point. I think this vaccination is really about for everyone else as well, because then that way you are not giving this to the 76-year-old clerk that you work with that's sitting next to you in a cubicle. So the question remains then with organizations, if this one person does not want to take this vaccine and they have a higher probability of being infected, do you then isolate that person? Does it become the scarlet letter, right? Do you isolate that person? And does the organization have the right to do that? Put them in a closet someplace in order to work there so you don't infect the people sitting next to you. This is bigger than a virus. This is bigger than a vaccine. This is an HR nightmare, right? In the realm of public health. And I'm not saying I have the answers. I certainly do not.
It's a very slippery slope.
It sure is.
Well, let me introduce this into the conversation because I think we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. Let's look at some of the cultural issues that we have to deal with this vaccine as well. On the state commission I serve, there was a doctor from Johns Hopkins of talking about within the African American community the amount of distrust when it comes to the medical system and historically how African Americans have been experimented upon. So it's going to be important that there are going to probably be weekly calls, press conferences, different things starting in January, disseminating information so families have the best information available to make those decisions for themselves. But it's kind of tough if an employer is going to be mandating for you to take something when you have historical evidence that supports your distrust of the system. That is another piece of the puzzle that I think that is going to be a tough one, and as you say, an HR nightmare.
There's HIPAA laws that come into play as well. You know, these are my medical records. So how do you know that I don't have a medical issue that that says I shouldn't take the vaccine? We don't know this information yet, and these things may come out. They may be people who have a bad reaction to the vaccination, and we may see that people with X disease or X chronic illness should not take the vaccine. Do you have to disclose that to your employer now? Do you have to get permission for not having a vaccination just to show up to work? Like, there's so many things that come into play here. And let's just say here, and I know we are all happy that this vaccination is here, but how do we know this vaccine is actually going to work and the disease hasn't, manipulated itself and become something else? We see it with the flu virus every year. Right? How many times have we got that wrong each year? Right? So it's
half the time.
it's pretty scary, and I said maybe long term there's some way we can incorporate this and put these things into place, but not right now. I think there's too many unknowns.
Yeah, but at the same time, the vaccine doesn't necessarily say that you are immune forever. Even the flu vaccine, I believe, again, not a medical scientist, not a virologist, don't at me, but I really think, though, that it reduces the symptoms that you have so that you can get through it without being hospitalized. Mm-hmm. So even the flu vaccine only covers, I think, 3 strains, and there are like a lot more than 3. I don't know what they are. So even this vaccine, and how will we know, really, what if this vaccine turns out to be unsafe? And I, as an organization, have mandated you to take this vaccine and you become even more ill. What kind of lawsuit do we have there?
We've never really eradicated a virus. We thought we
Correct.
did smallpox. We
No,
thought
it
we
still
did
exists.
polio, but they're out there. We've never cured a virus. This is COVID-19, it's not COVID-1. And there'll be a COVID-20 and a COVID-30. The one thing about nature, everything wants to live. Just as much as we want to live, that virus wants to live. And it's always going to try to find a way to live. It's just survival of the fittest. I fear the bigger thing that really is going to affect our society is how risk adverse we've become as a population. We've become so comfortable in America every day in our lives that we're afraid to take everyday risks that lead to rich and fulfilling lives. There's a risk associated with going out and catching a virus, catching a cold, doing anything. And it's like we've gotten almost with this virus, we're afraid to go out and live anymore. And I think this has really changed the way we operate our lives. And that, to me, is the bigger fear.
Yeah, and I'm on the opposite of that. I think it's more about human compassion. Making risk and not considering the impact to those people around us that we're learning about right now in this environment, like going into a place and demanding not wearing a mask and becoming violent because of it. I think there is some things of, yes, living our lives, but living our lives knowing that we share everywhere we go with someone else on this world and being considerate of those individuals as well. So I think
we're talking apples and oranges here. The other day, I saw this on the parking lot, and I thought it was somewhat humorous. A gentleman about my age, probably a little bit younger, looked healthy. I cannot assume otherwise, sitting in his truck all by himself, not another vehicle within 100 feet on the parking lot, talking on a cell phone with a mask on. And we all know how the mask muffles the voice. And I thought, isn't that interesting how that's changed our behavior? And, when it comes to the mask, there is no standard whatsoever. And it's like, we have changed our lives, and I hope not for the permanent.
But in
we're
regards
making
to
those kind of decisions, like how's that helped him in that vehicle?
In regards to that point, though, I think that's a little tough to look across a parking lot and judge
Sure, 'cause I don't
what
know.
someone is doing
Right, I don't
because
know.
I found myself getting in my car and talking with my mask on, not because I was afraid. It was just that I had it on, I was comfortable, or I was in a conversation, I didn't think about taking it off. Or I know that, you know, when I'm in my office downtown and I'm about to go into a building across the street, I know that I'm going to have to put it on. There's no one around me, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on now because I know I'm going into an establishment.
Fair point.
So I think that's a little bit different. Yes, COVID has changed a lot of things. I think the thing that COVID should never change is our compassion for one another.
Absolutely.
Andy.
Yeah, and without a doubt. So yeah, I mean, I see lots of people driving around with a mask on, but I look at my mom, who I have to take to the doctor's appointment, and she's 76 years old. She sits next to me, and about a mile before we get to the doctor's office, she puts her mask on. And I said, Mom, we're not even there yet. She's like, I'm just getting ready. I think it's sometimes a mental thing too.
Sure.
And if that person is happy, she also gets her keys out of her purse when she walks into the house about a mile and a half before I pull into her driveway. It's just what she does. So I think a lot of people are just in that habit of. Now, the CDC has also said that if you think your hands are dirty, you don't take your mask off. So maybe he took that phone call because he had to, right? Wasn't able to sanitize his hands, and he's not removing his mask. We don't know what those folks are doing, but right, and I hear you, but still, I think though, I agree. I think compassion is really what we're trying to see here, and I live my life just as fearlessly as I did before. But what I don't want to do is be asymptomatic and kill your grandma. I could not live with myself if that was at all contacted back to me. So I don't wear a mask for myself. I fully believe that I probably will be okay, right? I'll probably be one of the millions of people, if I were to contract this disease, that I'll probably come out with it all right. But what if my mom is there? And so I wear a mask, and I think it's important for folks to do that and be a little bit fearful, not for your own life.
Absolutely.
But for the lives of the other people that are around you.
But are you also saying that this is a disease that we may just have to learn to live with?
Oh man, yeah.
You know that we're just going to have to alter our lives enough where we can still enjoy life.
Absolutely.
All right, be compassionate to others, but know that there's a risk out there that we can get sick at any given time, and that's scary.
Well, that was the point. We've never eradicated a virus.
That's right.
We have to live with it, you know, and how we adjust our lives and our culture. Many things are changing, and it's kind of scary. Not kind of, it's terrifying.
There you go.
Yes, it is. We're going to hold it right there, and we'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about COVID. Obviously, it's dominating our world, but there's so many angles to this story. The story that we're looking at now is that more than 130 Marylanders have been charged or arrested for COVID-related violations. So that means that we are snitching on our neighbors. Andy, what say you?
You know, I'd really like to know what happened with 130 cases, and I am completely just going off my gut instinct here. Here's how I think at least maybe one of these cases went down. There's a big party in the middle of the surge, right? So we're not supposed to be gathering, and it's probably out front, and an officer probably came, and I think we covered this story once, although it wasn't in Maryland, I think it was in Florida or something, and the officer shows up and says, guys, you got to break this up. There's like 35 of you. We're in the middle here. This isn't going to happen. And they go, yep, you got it. And then the officer had to come back. And I'm sure that those people were like, you know what you can do, officer? Let me tell you about all the things that I don't like about you. And I have a feeling that might be some of these arrests. I do. I think that might be a non-compliance issue. What I don't see, and I'd love to hear from you, of course, is that we've got stormtroopers out there for 49,000 compliance, right? Hear me out, though. Going in and raiding people's houses. That's not happening. These are the Maryland State Police officers responding to a complaint, analyzing what is happening, and then doing their best to assess this situation. So I don't think we're going in and snatching 130 people out of their bedrooms saying that there's 5 people in a house. But again, I don't have the data.
Well, Andy, you said you'd like to hear from me, so you shall.
Bring it. I got a good perspective on this too. Let's go.
So as a retired state trooper, I think you hit the nail right on the head. I've been in that situation where you really don't want to make an arrest. You really just want to solve the problem and restore order to the community and go away. And you don't want to deal with hours of paperwork that's going to lead to nothing. I would suggest many of those arrested at 130, and we had a phrase for it, contempt of cop. And it was simply, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and you've put us in a no-win situation where you have to make a decision, and if you don't, it's malfeasance or negligence on the police officer's part. I would suggest more often than not, that's what's going on here. I cannot see my brothers and sisters in the state police going out violating anyone's Fourth Amendment right to be secure in their home because they're gathering socially. And I might also suggest there might have been a little bit of extra social lubrication, alcohol involved in a lot of these situations that might have exacerbated the fact pattern.
So some of our college communities may have been the culprit of this 130?
The what, please?
Some of our college communities.
Oh, I would suggest that's highly likely.
Terrence, what say you?
I agree. I think this was kind of one of those things of, you know, we've asked you to stop. We told you, we warned you by now. Now you're probably in the officer's face, or you're telling this is my house, and you're kind of making your stand. As we said, we've seen in the other article that we spoke about a few weeks ago, and the officer got to the point of saying, okay, before this gets out of hand, I'm going to arrest you, or I'm going to give you a ticket. I'm going to ticket you right now. But at the same time, it may be a case of kind of being a little heavy right now, so people have a little fear and fall back and be more considerate later. Right? So make a couple of examples of people legally. Of course, you want to do it within the realms of being legality. If you're in a public place, you're not doing something and someone's reported you. And because it is against executive order, or it is breaking a law or a violation of public safety, then I'm going to give you a ticket. And you go tell your friends that you got a ticket, and go put it on social media that you got a ticket, and then the next person says, I don't want a ticket, so they may change their behavior. So it may be a case of being a little heavy up front right now and executing on what you can, just so people will kind of, you know, practice the right practices for safety in the communities.
I still think that these are very low numbers, right? When you look at the fact that Governor Hogan came out a little bit stronger with his rhetoric right before Thanksgiving, and I think he's just trying to use the bully pulpit to sway behavior, because obviously if there was going to be heavier enforcement around Thanksgiving, these numbers don't suggest that there was really
and on
heavier
Thanksgiving
enforcement.
Day there were no arrests.
Right. Right.
Which is very relevant.
Right. So
But that's also very important. So I think that lends to our point, right? What we don't have is law enforcement barging into houses someplace and saying, you're gathered around the turkey dinner and we're going to pull everybody out and arrest them. One, there is I cannot imagine any executive lawful order from a commander that's going to come down to our police department to say, go out and do this. It's a waste of those resources. But what I really do think is happening is that if you have neighbors around a house or a community, or there's a pool, or there's a big park, and at that point when things are all shut down, you can't just violate that in front of everyone. One, because you're going to then at some point go back and possibly go to work if you're a nurse or a doctor. And I think really what happened was, I need you to break this up. I'm not going to do that. Okay, well, then I'm going to break it up for you.
Right.
And I'd really like to see, I think it was something like 49,000 complaints and 130 people were charged. I'll take those crime statistics any day of the week.
And some of these are businesses as well.
Sure.
You know, some of these businesses that have to keep their occupancy down to a certain percentage or a certain head count in their businesses, and they're above it. So someone's, you know, reported it. They walk into an establishment and they see 100 people when there's only 25 people supposed to be in there, no one wearing masks. So they leave and they make a phone call to the police officers, and the police officers come to the establishments and tell the people, you know what, you're in violation. Yeah. So I think these are some of the things that may come into play as well. I agree. I don't believe that no one's banged down anybody's door and said, we heard you have too many people in your house. But I think this is more about being in the public spaces and creating an unsafe environment for others.
So the question becomes, obviously, we're in the danger zone in regards to kind of where we are with COVID, with numbers increasing and exploding all over, especially many of the counties around us. The question is, as the pandemic increases going through the winter, does enforcement increase? What say you, Matt?
That's an interesting question. I really don't know how to respond to that. In all likelihood, yes, as much as I hate to say that, but I think you made a very valid point. And it is about sending a message to that 1% to 2% that trickles down to control the other 98%. I mean, essentially, when you're out working radar on a highway or on one particular road, you might only get one car in 100, but you're slowing down that 99. So, in all probability, yeah, this is about controlling behavior. And
I'm thinking realistically, right? And I don't know if we're going to have big gatherings out in parks, and I don't know if bars and restaurants are closing down at 10 o'clock at night. There may not be an opportunity for this to actually happen outside of your own personal house. I don't see a lot of pool parties in the middle of January in Western Maryland when it's snowing. So there may not be an opportunity for these complaints to come in. Yeah. And for officers to have to respond to something and folks to go away. Also, I would say, though, is that we're more further into this pandemic than we were. I'd love to see when those 130 people were arrested or charged. April, May, June, July. Like, this is now 11 months into this, 10 months into this. And I think the majority of folks get it, right? If we don't control it, these restrictions will continue and summer's going to suck, right? So how about, I think being able to control that behavior is happening by the virus itself. And maybe police don't have to go in and remind folks about these executive orders as much, I'm hoping.
Yeah, I don't think I think there will have to be a reminder, but I think we'll see it late February, early March, when people get complacent and comfortable. As you said, the weather will start changing. Yeah. The sun will come out.
The first spring day that hits.
Exactly, and businesses who have outdoor patios right now, who are not using those, we're putting in place, will open their doors again, and people will come out, and people will gather, and it's going to be difficult to turn people away at a certain head count when your business has suffered for the 6 or 8 months prior.
Or a year.
So, yeah, I do see we may see some of those violations around the early spring.
I'm a glass half full guy.
Okay.
So by the end of February, end of March, we have 50 million people vaccinated. And if we look at the statistics, young people, it has virtually no effect on the virus. So 50 million out of a country of 330 million is a significant amount of population. By May, we're about 120 million people vaccinated. At that point, do we start returning back to a normal life? Do we start looking at, of course we still have the elderly and the vulnerable and those with the comorbidities, but are we then starting to say, like, the mask, all our precautions that we're taking now, are they starting to subside and we go back to the normal way of life? And I suggest that's where we're headed, and that's where we should look to go.
I would like to think so. My daughter's club volleyball schedule is set, and I would love to get back to traveling and watching and cheering on those girls. I'm going to take the last word on this. My biggest concern is that towards January, early February, when the Washington football team is making their playoff run, I am afraid of the house parties and the events that I'm going to have at my home. That the numbers may be a little, and the social distancing may be a little bit awful because of the celebrations.
So we'll leave on the record with that?
I am on the record with that.
Yeah.
And we have nothing to worry about.
Fine, folks.
Up next, 4 panelists, 5 topics in 10 minutes. Stay with us for Fast 5. Welcome to Fast 5. Let's get started. First up, floors collapse in former Hamilton Hotel in downtown Hagerstown. Matt, what say you?
This is an interesting situation from what I know about it. As I understand, contractors were working in the building, and the liability of actually what caused this collapse is an interesting thing. The insurance company, I think Mr. Azidi owns the building, I believe the name is. The building was obviously insured. They took a liability, they took a risk of insuring that building. So is it going to come down to as a structural defect? Did the contractor cause this? What happened to cause these people to be displaced? Where the liability on this, that's one issue. And then, of course, your word of the day, compassion. What happens to these poor people that are dislocated, especially now cold weather's coming and the time of the year? There's some very concerning issues. I know the Red Cross has stepped in, but I think this would be a great opportunity for our county's benevolent organizations to step forward and do something to help out the people.
And looking at this and from what I've heard about this, it seems like all the businesses have been able to find the resources and they've relocated and things of that nature. but the piece is that the people that need the help the most have been left behind at this point. Terrence, what say you?
Agree. From my understanding, it's about 11 families that have been displaced. They've actually collectively been working together and band together to kind of speak as one voice. So not one individual is speaking out, so they come together. They've been meeting periodically. They've been reaching out. Local nonprofits have been supporting them. But unfortunately, this is something that happened the day before Thanksgiving. We know it was difficult enough around the holidays. The cold weather, as you said, is setting in. But to see 11 families displaced, and it's great for those organizations, including myself, who has actually reached out to them and had kind of arranged some things with for our city. Through Lifehouse Church has actually went out to support them, and the Red Cross is actually subsidizing some of their cost their rooms in the hotels. But I would like to see the city step up a little bit as well. You know, I'm not saying that they don't have any liability personally, but I think it's a great opportunity to see our local officials actually step in, speak up, speak out, and escalate this and accelerate this as quickly as possible. So that's a charge I would put out there.
Yeah, because looking at this of, all the entities that were affected, the residents are the ones with the least amount of resources, right? They're the least to have the ability to reach out to the right person that can amplify their calls and get them to a quick resolution. And just thinking about, we're in the midst of a pandemic, in a holiday season with temperatures dropping. This is a very unfortunate circumstance. Andy, what say you?
Yeah, and I think we need to consider what's going to happen in January, February, or March, and 6 months from now. I don't think that this liability issue is going to go away overnight. I don't think they're going to figure it out anytime soon. And that means that this building is not going to be fixed anytime soon, and these folks are going to be displaced for more than just the Christmas season. So I agree, and you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I think the city does need to do something, even if it's just to connect the multitude of nonprofits that we have in this area that could help these folks. They're going to be out. They're out for Thanksgiving. They're going to be out for Christmas, for the holidays when it gets warmer outside. Their dogs and their ferrets and their cats are all at the Humane Society. These are disjointed families trying to pull together on their own to create a community. And I think the community needs to embrace them. And we need to remember about this when the holiday season is over and when folks aren't asking for money for these individuals for Christmas presents. We need to think about first day of school. We need to think about folks going to college if they have college kids. We need to think about getting folks to be able to go to work and come back again, babysitting. Their whole lives are upended, and it's not going to end anytime soon, and we need to remember these families come April, May, June, July, and even into October next year. Should it take that long?
I will say this about our community. We have the resources, right?
We do.
We have the people and the compassionate people, and we have individuals and businesses with resources to help these people. They need a champion and someone to coordinate that work to be able to get them resolution quicker. What say you about that, man?
No, I totally agree, and that's why I mentioned, the benevolent organizations. I definitely think that this is a great opportunity for them to step up, whether it be the Salvation Army or the Red Cross or the churches. My God, that's what they exist for. And but who spearheads that is, of course, the leadership issue and the question of the day. Who does that? As a conservative, I kind of look at this and say, gee, if this happened to my house and my floor collapsed, do I turn to the local government and say, fix me? But then I have insurance. And I'm thinking, how many of these renters have renter's insurance and have a backup plan? And that's the unfortunate thing. I heard today about one particular girl, 20-year-old girl that's going to college and working for FedEx, but she's been dislocated and living at the hotel and trying to make ends meet. And again, 20 years old, what resources does she have to put her life back together right now? And it's a challenge.
And floors don't just fall overnight.
No.
There's code enforcement that should have been in place. And not saying it wasn't, because as you said, there may have been contractors in there, but how did it get to this point?
Right.
That, and that's where I say maybe the city could find themselves maybe not liable, but more compassionate to these constituents that are in this place, that their policy and procedures should be governing so things like this don't happen as often. And not saying that it's a frequent activity, but there's some kind of code enforcement that may have been too lax for this situation, where the city can say, you know what? Let's do something for these families. Let's organize. Let us be the key or the focal point for getting some of these organizations together, as you stated. But and I know that some of them are involved. So let me also put that disclosure out there as well, that I know that there are some of our council who I know have actually been contacted, have been engaged, and have been actually went out there to speak to the families. I believe Councilwoman Martinez actually went out to kind of speak to the families as well, just to kind of offer them some words of support as well. So not saying, but I think there's more that can be done.
I agree with you. I spoke to Councilwoman McIntyre today, and she gave me the back brief and the story, and really kind of gave me the full skinny on the whole thing. And you're right, and there should be a city part. You made a good point, Andy, that I'd like to go on about establishing liability. We've all had automobile accidents at one time or life or another with another driver, and it always comes down to what insurance company is going to pay what. Mm-hmm. And often your own insurance company, even if you're not at fault, will step up and pay and then go after the other insurance company. Unfortunately, in a situation like this, the contractor's insurance company and the builder's own insurance company, neither one are going to want to pay up. Yeah. Because the first one to pay out is going to assume the liability.
Sure.
And the dollar figure on this is going to be huge.
Well, that's the whole point. This isn't a $50,000 Dodge, right? This is a corner of a building and lives displaced. So.
Yeah. Next, former Senator Paul Sarbanes of Maryland has passed away at the age of 87. Matt.
I remember Senator Sarbanes quite well, actually. I actually met him one time back when he was a member of the House of Delegates. We never agreed on anything politically whatsoever. But he was kind of known as a very gentle man and a gentle giant in a lot of ways. He never made a lot of waves. He was a very quiet person. I can remember watching him on TV back when we only had 3 stations, Channel 2, 13, 11. And, for the record, I'm a recovering Carroll County resident where we could get the Baltimore stations very well. And I remember seeing him on the nightly news occasionally. And he always came across very gentle, and heartfelt prayers go out to his family.
Now, my recollection of Senator Sarbanes is Sarbanes-Oxley, being a financial advisor, that was big on the radar, in the early 2000s. And then obviously it was challenged in the Supreme Court, and there was some adjustments made to that. But he has a legacy that will live on for quite a while because of, what we were facing in the early 2000s with the technology boom bursting and some of the accounting issues there that the Sarbanes-Oxley law was there. So there is some good work that many think that he brought to the table. There are obviously some conservatives that disagree with that, but that he brought to the table that will live on forever. Andy, what say you?
Yeah, he really was the quiet worker, right? An intelligent man. I think he was either a Fulbright or Rhodes Scholar, studied in England for a bit, and then came back. And I always saw him as the guy that got stuff done, but you never heard about it until it was actually in progress and really affecting people. Whether you agree with his politics or not, I think most people can agree that he really tried his best to serve this state and his people in a way that he thought was the best, and I can always get behind that.
Would you say that his style of governing was a throwback?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit.
Terrence.
Yeah, I think he left a legacy as well with his work. You can't mention Enron, WorldCom without thinking Sarbanes-Oxley. And being in finance myself for a number of years, I can accredit probably a good amount of hours of compliance training that came out from the work that he did as well. But it kept the financial institutions on their toes, as they should, and there was some accounting things that needed to be brought to light. So he will go down in infamy for that work that he did, and as he should, and he should be respected for what he contributed to our culture.
So next up, schools confront off-the-rail numbers of failing grades. I can say as the father of daughters, it is a balancing act. My daughters normally are traveling all over the East Coast, especially last spring in regards to volleyball and different sports. That's been cut to a halt, and everything has just kind of been local and some group things. It has really been tough on them because they've lost that rhythm of life that they have. Kind of that, as an athlete, that education, school, that balance you have between the two that kind of keeps you moving forward. We've had to get creative in regards to kind of how to help them moving, but obviously across the nation, this is a struggle. educator. Let me come to you.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think what this really shows is that we have a really unequal education system. Obviously your girls are loved and supported. Think about the families and the kids
Yes.
who doesn't have the Reggie Turner for their father, right? And so I think that's what we're seeing. What we're seeing is education has to take this and change. We have to reach students that are affected not just by COVID and being home. They don't have internet. They don't have the support system. Of course their cameras are off during Zoom because no one's telling them out there in their home because they're not home, they're working 3 jobs. My point is, I think if anything, this provides a really big transparency into how our education system needs to pivot to be able to serve all of our students, the Turners of the world and the kids who don't have you as a dad. And I think that is like one of the biggest parts that I've seen in COVID in education is that this has come to light. We need to educate the kids and provide resources and services to those who can't find it on their own. And we need to get English scores up and we need to educate them because I need them to graduate, stay in Maryland, work hard, pay taxes, start their business, and give back to that state.
Terrence.
I think your last point is the biggest point. I don't have any children personally, but education affects every single thing we do. It impacts our economy, the jobs that we have in the labor force, the quality of jobs that we have in our labor force, and the F that's being given to these children is less on the children, but more on the education system at that point in time. The education system is behind the ball, and it has been for a number of years, and we've been working, and there's been some creative outlets and some creative schools and charter schools and things that are trying to do something different, but I think this is the reset period. This is the exact time where the education system can say, hey, let's clean the slate, let's do something different. Let's incorporate more technology instead of kind of patching it in as some schools have and some curriculums have. And let's do it completely new. Let's put equity into education because equity has not been an education system that was created before Jim Crow. You know, so you got to think about some of those things as well. And also economically, when we start looking at the technology and the cost of technology and the cost of education, we're now moving the cost of public school, private education into public education. Because now, if I don't have the fastest internet speeds, or if I don't have multiple laptops or tablets in my household, I can be at a disadvantage for education. So these are the kind of things that really need to be thought about and really need to be enforced.
Andy, you mentioned a point of a 2-tier system in the schools, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing. You know, the private schools, the Catholic schools are back in session with the kids learning. And they're getting the socialization process, the whole person concept in the classroom. What are things kids strive for? Competition. You know, whether it's on the playground or in the classroom, and the teachers call out the grades, who got the A's, who got the B's. I mean, all of us remember when it used to be posted and you competed and you work against yourself. Working at home, we've taken that away from the kids. We've taken that drive. Even the Surgeon General saying the kids need to be back in school. We're told to follow the science all the time with COVID. So if we follow the science and we follow the Center for Disease Control, the schools would be open and the kids would be back in, and we wouldn't have this disparity like we're having right now. For the life of me, I don't understand why the schools are not open, why the kids aren't back in school. We know there's been one death of a person under the age of 20 years old in Maryland, and we don't even know the story of that was attributed to COVID. This goes back to what I said earlier. We're becoming so risk adverse. We're hurting our society, and the treatment or reaction to this disease might be worse than the cure.
Here's what I'll say to that. You know, I think that we have to be careful when we look at issues like this because, again, I'm a middle class father, and I can supplement and provide resources to my children that other families can't. You know, in my home, we're comfortable. There's 5 of us. We have plenty of space that on any given day, I can work from my home office, so can my wife. My other daughter can be downstairs or upstairs. My 2 daughters could be in their room. Everyone has internet, and we're working and we're functioning just fine. You know, there's no other generation of family in my home, no elders or anything of that nature. I think we have to be careful when we look at it through our own lens because there are many families where multiple generations are living at the family. Some in that home are high risk, some are not. And if we just say that kids are supposed to be in school, the most vulnerable kids, and they're taking whatever from school back home to that home situation, we're exacerbating some of those issues in regards to that.
And that's why that a lot of the areas of the country have gone to a hybrid system, where if you're in a not a multi-generational home, and it's the parent, your family is a perfect example. Your kids aren't going to really bring anything home, and the science is saying kids don't transmit the virus. I mean, they're saying that right now. I mean, that's from the Center for Disease Control. They said kids are not the carrier. That being said, why not a hybrid system? Why not return the kids back to the competitive environment where they learn how to socialize with one another, how to interact, how to compete, where they have the teacher looking at them and they're not monitoring whether they're turning Zoom on or off. It worked for all of us with our education system. We turned out okay.
I really want my kids back in school, but I am mindful of people that have circumstances that are unlike mine. Here, I'll take the last word on this. Coming out of COVID, though, we should never have another snow day again, right?
That's right.
Snow
Learn
days,
at home.
Snow days are a thing of the past, because we should have the technology that we can go back and forth at the drop of a hat once we get through this, to have a hybrid model in place for our students. So we should not lose days any longer.
Or summer break, right?
Hey.
School year still 180 School year still 180 days.
Next, Frederick Gym owner builds coalition of businesses demanding equity. Terrence, you have some relationship with business owners down in Frederick. Let's start with you.
I think this is coast to coast right now. I think business owners are kind of in a difficult position. They've been closed for a number of months. They've gotten to the kind of phase approach that we've seen here in Maryland, where phase 1, phase 2, and you had some hope coming. And now there's some fear right now if we're going to have to close again. There's also restrictions coming out almost every week that's altering in a little tweak. And I get why we have these restrictions, but it's not always easy for a business owner to change their business model or how they service with their clients weekly on a drop of a dime. You know, how many people now they can let into their establishment? You know, who can wear masks, who shouldn't wear masks, how they should wear masks, should they take it off when they eat, should they not eat? It's like there's a lot of those little things that are putting stresses on business owners that are not only worrying about bringing in revenue, but how not to be out of compliance to be safe as well. So yes, business owners want a voice. They've been spoken to a lot. They've been kind of at the mercy of whatever's been mandated. So I think this is just them advocating for themselves and coming together and wanting to speak out.
You know, it seems to me that small businesses have been put into an adversary relationship with big businesses by how government has injected itself into the conversation where everyone can be at Walmart or the big box stores crowded upon Black Friday shopping, but the restrictions have been more onerous on small businesses. Matt, I'll tee that up for you.
That's exact. You might have saw me to making notes. It becomes a point of selective enforcement. Yeah. You know, the small mom and pop shops don't have the lobbyist. They don't have the money to influence like Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, the big chain grocery stores. This is certainly not equal justice. You know, these small mom and pop stores have to make payroll. And we talk about compassion. I see a total lack of compassion to the grassroots that make the country work, the small business, but it sure is going to big business, which really suggests that big business, big corporations, big tech are what's running our country instead of the everyday lay citizen that gets out of bed and signs the front of the paycheck.
Right. You know, the other thing is that, we aren't that far removed from, billion-dollar bailouts for the banking industry that basically propped up the entire system. But now we're fighting over pennies in regards to we don't want to help small business and extend the CARES Act and PPP funding and things of that nature. It's really curious to me in regards to how our government is working at the highest levels in regards to whom they're willing to cut the checks for and who they aren't in the times. I mean, obviously we are borrowing from tomorrow, right, to stabilize today. But if you're not going to make that in regards to the middle class people that are the true job creators, I think we're headed to a dangerous circumstance of, the the foreclosures that we're going to see, the bankruptcies that we're going to see, and then all the health effects of that. Can you imagine pouring your life into a business? You put every dime of everything that you had into that, and you have a government that is failing you right now. Andy. Yeah,
so Danny Farrar is the CEO of SoldierFit, and that's who started this movement. And I think one of the things that I really clued in on is, you know, if he cuts his gym down by half, that's a huge chunk of his profit, where if Walmart says only half of the people can come in, they're going to be fine. The Walton family is going to be just fine at the end of this. But where I really clued into this, and it does come down to selective enforcement, is if you have health inspectors walking into a small business, which is a bakery, saying there's too many people in here, let's go back to the 130 people who were arrested, but refuse to walk into a big box store to say the same thing, that's a problem, and I get that. What this means is that we need a better process in which to open up the Walmarts who have the grocery, who have the veggies, who could be the only grocery store within miles or blocks of certain neighborhoods, and I understand that, but we can't selectively enforce to say, SoldierFit, you have to close down by half. You can only let 50% in, but you know, Walmart's just so big, and I don't want to fight with the greeter in the front, and we're not going to do that. That's the point that gets me, right? I understand that we have to cut down business by half. We need to be safe. We need to wear masks. We need to enforce that. But the greeter at Walmart is not going to enforce the big guy walking in without a mask, because that guy's going to punch him in the face and walk out the door. So what happens? People just walk in, right? We have to come together either as a community, as a city, as a municipality, or as the government to say these folks can't walk into Walmart at 100%, just like they can't walk into SoldierFit at 100%. And for that point, I agree with them. He's getting hosed. And he's going to lose his business, and the Walton family is going to have a really nice Christmas this year.
Yeah. And the Walton family has soon owned a chain of gyms. They own everything else. You know, as the small guys pushed out, they're going to. But I mean, this is terrible what's happening.
But it's not just happening. We allowed this model to create across our country for the last 15, 20 years. Yeah. This city right here in Hagerstown, we have 2 Walmarts and a Target and all these other big box stores that we put in our communities, and we wonder why our downtown Main Street looks like a ghost town.
Go find a hardware store.
Exactly. So we put ourselves in this predicament, and COVID once again is exposing us to bad decision making.
Transparency.
That's it. And that's where we're at right now. So the small businesses were always suffering. Now they're being a stranglehold by what's going on in the world.
Has made the richest man in the world richer.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what happens every time that we have these events that become economic events. It increases the gap between the have and the have-nots.
That's
exactly right. We're destroying the middle class.
And if we can build up the middle class, we will build up our communities. Yeah. But that is hard in a COVID situation when you only got 50% walking into the gym, and that's half a profit.
Well, we're going to hold on this topic because I believe next week we're going to talk about this more. Yeah. Because as of today, Baltimore City has basically shut everything down. No indoor, outdoor dining. So I think we're going to have more to say about this topic around the state.
I think it's the new mayor's first decision.
Yeah, and that's a pretty tough one to come out the gate with. Next, Maryland signs sister city agreement with region in northern France. Ooh, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, wow, you know, that's a great transition. Let's talk about something really hard where it kind of gets our blood boiling. Great, wonderful. We have a sister city in France.
Really tough to celebrate that right now. Right?
Yeah, like I can't get there, right? They're not going to let me in on my passport. So I can't wait to go visit our sister city. I am exhausted by COVID. I'm trying to keep our middle class up and running. I'm buying from small business. I am so happy we have a sister city in France. That's all I got.
I see the symbolic. Where's the return on the investment? What are we getting out of this? And I tried to research into this a little bit, and we talked about economic exchange and everything. It's like, well, just because we have a sister city, couldn't we do that anyway? What does this get us other than a headline? Well, not even a headline. 3rd page. What's the big deal?
I kind of feel that about Hagerstown, Indiana, but that's a different point. Yeah. Terrence.
Same thing. You know, I need more meat. This is great. You know, it's just icing right now. There's no real substance to this. Tell me that now, because of the sister city, that we can share resources and they're going to be sending us PPEs. And now you got me. Yeah. Now you tell me. Now I see where the benefit of being a sister city is, but not just so we go over there. I can see the Maryland flag hanging, you know, in France. It's really not.
Don't we have enough going on in Annapolis already, enough problems, instead of reaching over to France?
Well, we will always have those problems. I'm fine with
Yeah.
having a sister city in France. That's great. And one day I'll be able to visit it. That's wonderful. But you're right. Show me some PPE and throw me some resources to help our middle class, and then
And test kits that work.
Perfect.
All right, let's finish this off with a heavy lift. Congress is voting on Confederate statues at Civil War battlefiels. I think
10
we have a
minutes.
battlefield somewhere.
It's like down the street, around the corner.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Matt,
Yeah.
I'm coming to you first.
Damn.
This is, to me, this is not even controversial. I think there were two armies on that battlefield. There were two distinct armies on the battlefield. There was a losing army. But to deny that army was there and they represented something is eradicating history. Good won out. The right side won. But there has to be both sides of the story to understand what happened to get us where we are today. And I don't think erasing our history changes at all in any way. It's almost like me as a Catholic having statues in the church. That's not the Blessed Mother, that's not Jesus, but it's representative of something. And it represented what happened there 160 years ago. I don't think we should be rewriting history and denying what happened. And again, the good side won, my opinion.
Now, if we shrink this down and look at our community, I think part of the issue of concern in regards to the statue at Antietam Battlefield is its placement. It's historically inaccurate. And then the timing of it and who made the contribution was curious.
Do I understand the Park Service actually bought that from a private?
That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, I'm kind of a purist, right? If you put something out of context in a place where I'm supposed to learn history, what was your motivation? That's my struggle with it. And then for me, the battlefield, I'm not really that concerned about. But if you're going to put it in the public square and I need to pay for it with my tax dollars, of you basically reminding me of how my ancestors were oppressed, nah, I'd rather not kick in on that one. Andy, what say you?
So, have you ever been to the National Holocaust Museum in D.C.?
I have not.
Yeah, you should. It's
Absolutely.
incredible. Do you see the statue of Hitler? No, you don't. And the reason you don't is that we don't necessarily have to always glorify both sides of a war and both sides of good and evil. So as far as this battlefield is concerned, we don't always have to glorify the folks that oppressed individuals from there. We need to learn about that history. And if you walk into the Holocaust and the memorial, you'll learn plenty about what happened on both sides of that fence without one statue of Hitler peering down on anything in that museum or in that.
That's a good point.
Thanks.
That is an excellent point. I didn't quite look at it that way. But this.
And statues are monuments of worship. That's where they started from. That's where they. So, if you put a statue of something that represents something evil, then why honor it in that way? And honestly, personally, I can care less about the statues. And I don't think.
Personally, I agree the same way. I mean,
And if you take the statue down, does it erase history? No, it doesn't erase history because some history is told by the victor. And in this case, you're not the victor on the side of the South. You weren't the victor, but still, history is being told and history is being honored. My thing is, let's add the African American history back.
There you go.
That's where my focus should be.
Absolutely.
So the concern about erasing history, I'm not really, keen on or worried about, because I think it's hard to erase history by taking down a statue, especially in the technology age that we are in right now, the books that have been written and everything that's in place right now. But what I do love to see is some of this effort and this energy putting some of the African American history that has been erased, stolen, forgotten, intentionally back into our school books, back into our children, and back into American history as a whole. So that's what I want to see. And this statue issue, honestly, it's getting under my skin. It's a little annoying at this point in time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think about, in the midst of COVID and everything that we have going on, seeing that Congress is going to take this up, I'm like, really?
Yeah, right.
Like, we're worried about symbolism, but we have problems with
sister
we have problems with the people. Like, can we take care of the people? In regards to this, Terrence, I agree, but it's not bringing the history back. It's really telling the stories for the first time, especially in our community. There are so many parts of the African-American experience that have never been talked about or celebrated. As we uncover the history in the Johnson Street community and we are working with the owner of John Brown's Farm and working with those things. You know, I'm hearing from people saying, well, I never really heard the story told in that manner of how it really is. And now people are, the veil is being covered off. And I hope more people begin to ask, why was the story shaped in a manner that did not give us the true perspective of what's happening? I think those are the real conversations that we need to have. And then we can have a deeper dive and talk about, you know, what was happening, where did we go wrong, and what are we doing today that we still need to work on because we have the remnants of that are affecting us.
We're done.
I can't say anything beyond that.
I'm taking the last word.
Yeah, buddy.
That is all the time we have tonight. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and send your comments to feedback@theflipside TV. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. More importantly, we hope that you'll join us next week for another episode of The Flip Side.